You call yourselves scientists. You call yourselves the proprietors of logic and reason. But when it comes to the most basic truth about our own existence, you approach it in the most naive and unscientific way. Here's the thing. When you look out into outer space, you don't see any life. And then you look all around you here on Earth and you see lots of life. So you reach that conclusion that life must need unique circumstances to develop. It all needs to come together perfectly. And so you do some calculations and you say that life is so unique that there's a 1 in 60 billion chance for life to develop on the surface of a planet. Or maybe it's 1 in a trillion chance. The number doesn't actually matter. It's the thought process that led to it that matters. So what's the problem here? Well, by definition, that's a highly, highly unlikely answer. Our own existence, according to this approach, is just highly unlikely. Yet, here we are. But, of course, highly unlikely doesn't mean impossible, so maybe you did get it right. But saying that something highly unlikely is the reason we're all here, you really owe it to yourself to ask, if what we think led to life is highly unlikely, what's on the other side of the spectrum? What's on the likely side of the spectrum? And you've actually already answered this when you surmised that it's 1 in 60 billion, or a trillion, or whatever. Because what's the likely opposite of that? What's the opposite of 1 in 60 billion? It's 1 in 1. As in, we're alive here, the planets in our solar system are alive, the stars are alive, and every other spinning sphere out there needs to be alive for us to be a 1 in 1. But then you'll say, hey, we can't see any life out there, so it can't be a 1 in 1. To which I would say, no one actually asked what you can and can't see out there. You're jumping ahead. The first step is trying to figure out what's unlikely and what's very likely. What we can actually see or detect can come later. So as far as the more likely version of events is concerned, it's again, by definition, way more likely that all of these spinning spheres all around us are exactly like our sphere we call planet Earth. Whether it's here at our solar system or our galaxy, and all the way out to all the other galaxies, it's more likely that we're all the same. And again, we're not talking microbes here. For us to truly be a 1 in 1, the other spinning spheres need to be at least like us at the bare minimum. As in, they all need to have people, animals, and vegetation. And you'll look at me like, what is up with this guy? And I'll remind you that this isn't a matter of opinion. It's just that having absolutely everything be alive all around us is the more likely option. So when I ask you, why would you argue against the most likely and probable scenario? What would make you believe in a highly unlikely version of events? And you'll probably say, hey, look, buddy, we look at Earth, we see life. We look everywhere else, and not only do we not see any life, we see really harsh environments where life couldn't possibly survive. So I'll say, okay, so the reason you've made a conscious decision to go against the most likely outcome is because of what you see and what your senses are telling you. And this is where we hit that big fork in the road, where we separate the real scientists from the ones that are not as good at evaluating their surroundings. I mean, I get that our vision and our senses have the ultimate stronghold over us. What would we do without sight? We wouldn't be examining or evaluating anything if we couldn't see our surroundings. But that's just not good enough. As important as the senses are, we are obligated to ask ourselves if it's possible that what we see in outer space is not what's actually there. It's a really simple question if you think about it, and it might turn out to be the most important question we will ever ask ourselves. So here is what needs to happen for the most likely option, the 1 in 1 option to be real. This is what we need to ask. Is there anything in nature that we're aware of that puts an individual in a situation where its own environment is false? In other words, if you ask that organism to describe its surroundings, it would do its best to describe it for you. But because of where you are, your vantage point, you know that what that organism is experiencing is just a very temporary reality that will eventually change into the opposite of what that organism is experiencing. And if you haven't caught on yet, I'm talking about a fetus inside a womb. Yes, the process of gestation is a place where an organism is subjected to a very specific environment that you could argue is almost the opposite of the environment that organism is about to go into once the process is over. And at this point, you'll say to me, how on earth can we ever compare the process of gestation to our planet situation? How could the whole planet be going through something similar? And my answer would be, easily. Not only is this the easiest thing for nature to pull off, once you examine the symptoms, there's nothing else that even comes close. And just because our own perspective makes it feel almost impossible, our perspective doesn't actually mean anything as it applies to this very familiar process. In fact, the main reason you'll believe this is totally impossible is because nature managed to get us all used to a certain scale when it comes to organisms inside wombs. We're used to being a certain size and having a planet going through the same thing. For us, it's just a bit too much. For now, at least. But again, you are not an ordinary scientist. You're someone who can examine our planet's situation from a neutral and unbiased position. So when you're presented with the idea that our own planet Earth is actually currently undergoing the process of gestation, you'll probably look for clues to see if this is even possible. And the moment you do, all of the trademarks of this famous process become so obvious that you'll quickly start to understand why we don't see what's actually out there when we look out into the void of outer space. And the first trademark is exactly that. The fetus is in one place, which restricts seeing and being next to the life that's around it. As it grows and it makes itself ready to move into a totally different place where there's no obstructions to the same life that was always there. The problem is that for the majority of this process, the fetus doesn't have a clue about this other place it needs to eventually move into. So the current place feels like it'll last forever. But the thing to note about this trademark is that being next to potential life we can't see opens up the pathway towards the one in one, where all the spheres are the same. It's just the restrictive nature of the situation that makes it feel like we're not. The second trademark is a really important one. The fetus can't sustain itself inside the womb. It's dependent on life from an outside source. Now, for me, this is the thing that makes this all so obvious. I mean, we're on the surface of this planet. No one really knows what we're doing here. Our collective memory only goes back a few thousand years. So it's almost like we've woken up on the surface of a spinning rock. We've managed to convince ourselves that all the other spinning rocks are empty, when all along our own rock, our sphere, just happens to depend on one of these other spheres for life. I mean, the irony of saying we're alive and everything around us seems dead when the source of our own life happens to be one of these other spinning spheres is outrageous. And we say this because we can't see or detect any life on this burning fireball we call the sun. And yeah, believing that the sun needs to be alive in order to sustain our life, that might sound a little bit different, but it only sounds like that if you're willing to overlook how nature does this all the time. Our own collective experience being alive on this rock has shown that in all cases, when one thing sustains something else, it needs to be just as, if not more alive than the thing that's receiving life. And guess what? In all those cases, you don't really get to see whoever it is that's sustaining you. So when you realize you're in a situation where what you see out there is pretty much meaningless, it puts our relationship with the sun in a whole new light. Because even though we see a plasma-spitting fireball, knowing that our planet is going through this process means we're all going through this process as well as this planet's thinking cells, if you want to call us that. And because we're part of this planet, we don't get to see any life that belongs to the sun or any other sphere. We only get to understand it. I mean, if we could see the vegetation, the people, and the animals that are right now moving around on the sun's crust, then this wouldn't be the womb, and I'd be wrong. It's the very fact that the sun's very normal crust is not visible to any of us, along with the life on top of that crust. Us not seeing it is paradoxically the proof that it's there. Because you can't have a situation where you think you're more alive than something when it's your own life that's sustained by that something. That's so naive. Saying we're more alive than the sun because we can't see any life there, even though it sustains our life here. So it feels like we're all alone. We're depending on life from an outside source. What other trademarks can we find? Well, I don't know if you've noticed, but planet Earth is wrapped in a salty fluid that also helps sustain life. That's interesting. I'm pretty sure that's true for the fetus inside the womb as well, which needs embryonic fluid to sustain it. All these things just happen to line up nicely. But here's the thing that makes it so hard for you to believe. The oceans don't really look like the embryonic fluid we're used to seeing. The planet doesn't really look like any fetus we're used to seeing. And the sun doesn't look like any mother we're used to seeing. There's a disparity between the planetary scale and our own scale. So why is that? Well, the main reason is because we're not inside the womb. Our planet is. And what we're experiencing is a process of gestation by proxy, similar to how your own brain cells experienced the inside of the womb when you were a tiny fetus. You could argue that your own neural network was also going through the process of gestation, but in a very, very different way. And probably the most important detail about them going through this is the fact that they went through it together as a collective. So every fetus going through this process also has a group of its own thinking cells, if you will, who are all tagging along for the ride. So it seems like our planet is all alone, depending on life from an outside source, wrapped in a salty life-supporting fluid with a bunch of much smaller independent thinking entities experiencing the same process, but from a completely different perspective and as a collective. But you still won't believe it because your own eyes are telling you that everything you just heard is not possible. But I'll tell you this, your eyes are not brains. They can't judge the situation. They can only report back on what they see, and that's it. It's your responsibility to interpret and understand the situation for what it is based on things that go beyond your sight and your senses. So really the first thing we all need to realize is that we're all used to the womb being a certain size and time scale, and that being part of a planet going through the exact same process will feel very, very different in almost every way. Let's take time, for example. We're used to the process of gestation, for humans at least, to last about 40 weeks or 9 months. But it seems to be much longer for a planet. We know this because most of us have been here longer than 9 months. But here's the thing. For our planet, and everyone else at our planet's scale, it will feel like 9 months. Each scale has their own 9 months. And for each of these scales, it all feels the same as it does for us. But if you ask the scale below you, they'll say, your 9 months were actually thousands of years for them. And if you ask the scale above you, they'll say, your 9 months were only a few hours for them. Because, as Big Al once said, it's all relative. The only thing that really matters is understanding the relationship between the scales and how our brain cells will see us as planets, and we see them as brain cells. We see our planets as planets, and our planets will see us as brain cells, which means you're a brain cell to your planet. And at the same time, you're also a planet to your own brain cells. Of course, a person to all the other people in the same scale. Meaning, the planets will look like planets to us, but to each other, guess what? They'll all be ordinary people and animals. And you could go beyond that. Our brain cells will see what we call planets as galaxies, because it all depends on which scale you're in compared to the scale you're trying to observe. Now, at this point, many of you are already starting to tune out, and I get it. But your kids and your grandkids will understand this as clearly as you believe life can slowly develop on its own randomly. Because I'm either right or I'm wrong. And if I'm wrong, that won't really matter. But if I'm right, then every person on this planet will eventually need to understand this. And I'm not wrong. But what I am is at a disadvantage. There's only one of me and billions of all of you. And not just you, I'm going up against sight. I'm taking on vision itself, saying that everything we see here is fine and everything we see out there is not fine because we can't see anything past our own atmosphere. But even though I'm here in my lonesome and my beliefs and you're the clear majority, I've got something on my side that you don't. Math. Statistically speaking, my 1 in 1 beats your 1 in 60 billion out of the water. So it's by default the more reasonable answer. It's the answer that makes more sense no matter how you look at it, or don't look at it in this case. And eventually there will be a reckoning, because it doesn't matter how long it takes for us to understand it. When a likely answer is inserted alongside an unlikely one, the unlikely one will eventually wither away and die. You believed Earth was the center of the solar system because it looks that way. Now you believe Earth is the center of life in the solar system because it looks that way. You're wrong the first time and you're wrong again the second time. And understanding it truly is just a matter of time. So, what's the biggest takeaway here? What's the most important thing for us to understand? Well, if everything is alive all around us, just imagine that. Everything is alive. Everything has people and animals. It's just more and more nature. The same nature we find here expands to every corner of the universe. And knowing that the different scales are also part of nature and also fully alive, that means life itself goes beyond any barrier we could ever truly comprehend or come to terms with. But that's not the biggest takeaway. As exciting as the realization is that everything is totally alive and we will eventually at the end of this process be able to join this life, the most important thing you need to understand is that life here on this sphere and every other sphere is made. There's no randomness. Nothing just happens. As the cerebral cortex, or the so-called smart part of this planet's brain, all of us as humans have been allowed to grow and get to know our surroundings and get to know each other and learn to work together and experience what it means to be a part of this team we call natural life. But as we're all doing our thing in here, life just keeps on going all around us in a meticulously coordinated and planned effort, where all life is designed. We were made. We didn't just stumble into existence. When you believe life randomly grew on a single planet out of billions, then yes, you could say it's a random thing that happened. But understanding that everything is alive everywhere, that realization brings with it the undeniable, irrefutable understanding that we have a maker. And if the coin hasn't dropped yet, you all know who our maker is. This is what we've been struggling with since the moment he made us. And you know what? That's okay, because it's all part of the process. We're made, and we become slightly ungrateful. Not because we really are that way, but because we have zero experience at that point. Then we get to know the world, and we get to know each other, and we slowly get to know our Creator. There's some real ups and downs in the relationship, and ultimately, we find ourselves here at the big crossroads. As a collective, it seems like we feel like we've outgrown our Creator. I mean, He doesn't communicate with us in the same way that we communicate with each other. And as time passes, we ask, where are you? And without an answer, we start to think, or not think, we start to believe He isn't there. But this is exactly why the times we're living in are so exciting, because that's exactly what our Creator wants. The main objective with the process of gestation for the neural network is learning to be part of a society, being part of a team, and most importantly, how we act on a daily basis inside our team. How do we treat other people? Are we kind and compassionate, or are we cruel? When our Creator put some distance between us and Him, what happened as a result of that? We all act naturally. We're all ourselves when we don't believe our own Maker knows our every move. And so without knowing it, we've slowly put ourselves in two very different camps. On one side, you have all those individuals who made a conscious decision to become kind and compassionate people. And on the other side, you have everyone else. Knowing that our planet will eventually be born and we'll be moving from this restricted place into a place where we can actually see with our own eyes all this life that surrounds us, the barrier will fall. And when it does, there will be only one way to describe this new world, this new environment. Heaven. Because heaven is what happens when a planet is born. It's not what happened when you were born, but for your brain cells, that's exactly what happened. Your own neural network went through all of this, and for them, your 9 months inside the womb felt like thousands of years of getting to know their surroundings, the environment, and most importantly, getting to know our Creator, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the one that made this all possible. Still don't believe me? My name is Niv. I'm from Israel, born in a small farming community in the Jezreel Valley, about 20 minutes from Nazareth. But like you, even though my body's here on the surface, my root is inside the earth in the exact same way yours is. Have you ever wondered what planets and stars actually are? They're spinning roots that connect the inside of a sphere to the surface of that sphere. Because nothing, and I mean nothing, can live on the surface without physical representation on the inside. The planets and stars we see out there are all roots of people and animals living on the surface of the respective sphere they belong to. So while the Milky Way looks like a galaxy to us, to Earth, it will look like a planet with an inside and a surface. Now tell me this, why do you think Earth is seeing other planets and stars instead of the bodies that are all connected to those planets and stars on the surface of the Milky Way? Why is Earth seeing the inside and not the surface? What process in nature shows you the inside? When you yourself were inside the womb, our Creator allowed you to see deep inside our planet. You were shown the foundation of all life. You got to see other people spinning roots, including your mother's, when you were inside the womb. And when your own neural network was observing your surroundings as they were walking and living on the surface of your own root, they also got to see those spinning roots. The only difference was the size and time scale, where you probably got to see those roots spin way faster and look much smaller than they did to your own neural network. So I hope for you that you chose to be a kind and compassionate person. And to be honest, it doesn't even matter what it was that inspired you to be that way. It could have been your belief in our Creator. It could have been your parents, your culture, environment. Good role models you happen to meet along the way and learn from were a little bit of everything. The reason doesn't matter. Your actions are the only thing that matter. That's how we communicate with our Creator. When we say, oh, we believe in God, and our actions consist of forcing other people to either be like us or perish, man, you don't know how much trouble you put yourself in. But when we're a real positive influence on our surroundings, that's us saying to our Creator that with all the hardship and obstacles inside this very restrictive place, we are willing and hoping to take part in the next step our Maker has prepared for us as a collective. Being kind to your own collective is the only way forward. There will be no other way to participate in our planet's future. It's not a matter of how or why. It's just a matter of when.